Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going exploring a transcript you sent our way, a podcast episode all about how people can bring others to faith.
It's called By Your Hand Upon Me, Drawing Hearts to the Divine.
Some pretty deep stuff, right?
Absolutely. And from a sociological perspective, it's fascinating to unpack how these belief systems, how they spread, and what makes them resonate with people.
Yeah. Right off the bat, this source, it really highlights this whole idea of God's hand kind of guiding someone towards faith. They even use 3 different Bible translations of Acts 11.21 to illustrate it.
Oh, that's interesting. Using those different translations just shows how these subtle ways, the way that we interpret these religious texts, it can really affect how we understand concepts like that. I mean, for some people, this idea of God's hand, it might be a very literal active force, but for others, it could be more symbolic, a guiding presence, something like that.
Yeah, totally. Like the King James Version, it just says the hand of the Lord was with them. Simple. But then you've got the message. It talks about people turning to the master, and it's got this emphasis on God's approval, like a nod of agreement.
Right.
And then you go to the Amplified Bible, and it really takes it up a notch. It emphasizes God's power and presence, leading to the acceptance of Jesus as the Messiah.
Exactly. And those nuances, right, they can make a big difference. Think about it, even just like in everyday conversations, even the specific words we choose, it shapes how our message is received. Now, amplify that to religious texts, right? They carry centuries of interpretation, debate, all that history. You can see how powerful just those little word choices can be.
For sure. And it makes me think all this, it kind of leads right into what the source seems to be emphasizing the most. Divine power over human persuasion, right? Remember that quote from 1 Corinthians 2.4-5? Paul basically says, forget those fancy speeches. It's all about the demonstration of spirit and power.
Right, Paul? He was arguably one of the most impactful figures in spreading early Christianity. And this approach he had, right? Emphasizing the power of just genuine belief over, eloquent arguments. That's something we see even today, and not just in religion either.
Oh, yeah. So true. Think about any movement or leader, someone who really inspires people. It's rarely just the facts and figures, right?
No.
There's a certain energy, a conviction that pulls people in.
Absolutely. It's like, if we connect this to the bigger picture, there's a strong psychological element to it. Think about that idea of emotional contagion, how feelings can spread through a group, When someone truly believes in what they're saying, that passion, it can be infectious. It rubs off.
For sure. And speaking of powerful experiences, the source includes this, like really intense prayer, asking to become a channel for God's presence and power to bring people to faith.
Yeah. The language in that prayer, it's fascinating. It talks about being a vessel for God's love and power, a beacon to guide others. That sense, like you're a conduit for something larger than yourself, that can be very, very motivating.
Oh, absolutely. It says, thank you for the privilege you have given me to be a vessel through which your love and power flow. Can you imagine the psychological comfort and drive that kind of belief could give someone? Like, wow.
Yeah, it really makes you think what that kind of belief might do, like on a psychological level, right?
Yeah.
Feeling like you're chosen for a purpose, having that divine backing, it could be a powerful source of strength, and motivation.
And it goes beyond just the individual, right? It's not just me, myself, and I. The prayer goes on to say, let your presence within me overflow and touch those around me. Almost like a ripple effect,
Yeah.
It spreads out.
Right, and that brings us right back to that whole idea of emotional contagion. If you believe you're radiating this divine presence, others might pick up on that energy, and they might even feel drawn to it. It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
There's another line that really got me. I pray for the reality of your presence to become tangible, a beacon that guides lost souls back to you.
Yeah.
It's like almost creates this image of something physical, something you can actually see and feel.
Yeah, and that's where the role of tangible experiences or symbols comes in. It's one thing to just have faith, in your head, but having something concrete, something to connect to, it can really solidify that belief, make it feel more real. Think about rituals, icons, even shared meals, right? They all provide this sensory experience that can strengthen that feeling of belonging and a shared belief.
So it's not just believing, it's like experiencing that belief in a tangible way.
Feeling it.
Right?
Exactly. It's like the difference between, I don't know, reading about a beautiful sunset and actually standing there watching the colors change the sky. One is just this intellectual understanding, but the other, that's a lived experience.
Yeah, you really feel that, huh? And the source, it doesn't just leave it at prayer either. It gives some practical takeaways for anyone looking to draw people closer to faith, how to actually do it.
Yeah, and these are interesting because they touch on things that, they can benefit people even outside of a religious context.
Yeah.
It all starts with aligning yourself with God's purpose, becoming that vessel we talked about.
Right. So that's all about finding your purpose, finding meaning in what you do. That's something psychologists talk about all the time, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A sense of purpose, it contributes enormously to well-being. It helps us make sense of our lives, feel connected to something bigger than ourselves, and it gives us direction, motivation.
Okay, so the next takeaway, it's about seeking divine empowerment through prayer.
Right. And while that, yeah, it might sound specifically religious, the act of prayer itself, you can see it through a more secular lens as well. Think about the potential benefits of things like meditation or mindfulness.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating that inner peace, focus, even physical relaxation.
Then there's that reminder to reflect on Paul's approach, finding that balance between wisdom and power.
Which, when you think about it, it's relevant to anyone who wants to, communicate effectively, get their point across. It's not just about having the right information. It's about conveying it in a way that resonates with people, makes them feel it.
So it's about that genuine conviction we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Think about times when, you've been truly persuaded by someone. It's rarely because they had, I don't know, the fanciest PowerPoint presentation or use big words, right?
Right.
It's because they believed in what they were saying. And that passion, it came through. You could feel it.
Makes sense. And finally, the source, it encourages people to expect miracles.
Now, that might sound a bit, I don't know, out there to some people, but there's actually a lot of research, solid research, on the power of belief in healing and personal transformation. You got the placebo effect, right? People's health actually improving simply because they believe they're receiving treatment, even if it's just, a sugar pill. Or think about spontaneous remission. These cases where people, they just inexplicably recover from serious illnesses.
So, we're talking about the power of the mind to actually influence reality.
Exactly. Our thoughts, our beliefs, they can have a profound impact on our experiences, how we see the world, how we move through it.
Wow, this is getting pretty deep. But it's fascinating to see how all these concepts connect back to this idea of drawing people to faith. It's not just about preaching or arguing. It's about embodying certain principles,
Yeah.
radiating a certain energy that resonates with others.
Right. It's about creating this environment, this space where belief can just flourish, both within yourself and in those around you.
Okay, I'm liking this. This is good stuff. And this leads to a really interesting question.
Yeah. What's that?
Well, how do these principles, how do they apply, in contexts that aren't religious?
Ooh, good question. That's a really good question. That's actually where we'll pick up in part two. So we were talking about, divine power and that whole idea of expecting miracles. What if we shift that perspective just a bit? What if, instead of waiting for some kind of divine intervention, we focused on, the human potential to create change?
So instead of praying for a miracle to happen, you're saying we should be part of making it happen.
Yeah, precisely. It's about realizing that, we're not just these passive bystanders in life. We can actually participate. We have the ability to shape our realities, influence the world around us. We're not just along for the ride.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And it ties back to what the source was saying about aligning with a purpose, seeking empowerment. It's those are tools we can use, right, to create that positive change, whether we believe in a higher power or not.
Right. And that feeling, that sense of agency, it can be really powerful. Instead of just waiting for things to happen, we can take action. We can set intentions and work towards what we want to see, be the change and all that.
Okay, so we've established that these ideas can go beyond just religion, right? But how does that actually play out in the real world? Got any specific examples?
Oh, absolutely. Think about all those charismatic leaders throughout history. The ones who inspired movements, rallied communities, created lasting change. They might not have claimed to have divine power or anything, but they had this magnetism. It drew people in.
People like Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi.
Exactly. They were so connected to their purpose, spoke with such conviction, and they inspired others to believe in their vision. And that's where the power of belief gets really interesting. It's contagious. When you see someone who truly believes in something, it makes you kind of want to believe too.
So are we saying that anyone can cultivate this kind of influence? Is that something you can learn?
Well, it's not about becoming some superhuman figure. It's more about tapping into your values, what you truly believe in. Let that authenticity shine through. Be real.
Which, if you think about it, that goes hand in hand with what the source was saying about prayer and seeking divine empowerment, right?
Hmm.
Those practices, even if you view them from a secular lens, they can help you connect with a deeper sense of purpose, clarity.
Yeah. It's about finding that like inner compass, let it guide your actions. Which brings us back to expecting miracles. It's not about sitting around waiting for something magical to happen. It's about setting the stage, creating the conditions for positive change. You got to meet the universe halfway.
So instead of praying for a winning lottery ticket, you're praying for the focus and discipline to build a successful business, something like that.
I like that analogy. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
about understanding that we're not just, puppets. We have a role to play in our own destiny, right?
Right.
We have to take charge.
So it's not just about like personal growth, it's about how that personal transformation can like spread outwards, can impact the world.
Exactly. It's realizing that even our small actions, they can contribute to something much bigger. It all adds up.
Like that whole butterfly effect thing, right?
Yeah,
A small change here can cause huge consequences somewhere else.
precisely. And that's what makes expecting miracles so exciting. It's about truly believing that what you do can contribute to something amazing, something extraordinary. Embrace the unknown. Be open to the possibility that incredible things can happen when we align our actions with our beliefs. It's powerful stuff.
This is getting pretty inspiring, honestly,
Yeah.
like a call to action, go out there and be the change you want to see.
Exactly. And that change can start with something small, just a shifting perspective, a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper connection with your values. It all starts somewhere.
So what we're really talking about here is the power of belief, right? Not just belief like a higher power or God or whatever, but belief in ourselves,
Right.
our own ability to make a difference.
And that kind of belief, you know what? It can be contagious. When you give off that kind of conviction, it can inspire others to do the same, to find their own purpose, step into their power.
It's like this podcast episode we're looking at. It's all about tapping into that power inside us. We can be agents of change. It's pretty cool.
And that message, it goes beyond any religion or belief system, right? It's like a universal call to action. Step into your full potential and create a world that reflects your values. What could be better than that?
Okay, so we've come full circle here. We started with religious conversion, right? Explored the psychology of belief. And now we're talking about how those same principles apply to anything, any area where you're passionate about making a difference.
And that's the beauty of exploring these ideas, right? We start with one specific source, but the conversation can lead to insights that apply to, well, basically all of life. It's a journey.
Every deep dive, it's like an adventure. We never know where we'll end up.
And that's what makes it so fun. Embrace the unknown. Be open to new perspectives, new possibilities, new ways of seeing the world. You never know what you'll find.
So what does all this mean for our listener, the one who gave us this podcast episode transcript? What can they take away from all this?
I think it's an invitation to reflect, on their own beliefs about influence, about persuasion, about the role of faith in their life, whether that faith is religious or, something else entirely.
And to consider how they can use that same power to create positive change in their own little corner of the world.
Exactly. It's about understanding that we all have the potential to be those agents of transformation, to spark those miracles. We can all leave the world a bit brighter than we found it.
Wow. Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
And that brings us to a final question for our listener. If this
Mhm.
idea of divine power, right, if it can show up in these secular contexts, what are the ethical implications of that? What do we need to be careful of?
Ooh, that is a good one. That's a really good one. I'm super curious to hear what you think about that. So, where were we? Oh, yeah, those ethical implications when we talk about this divine power idea showing up in places outside of religion. What do we need to watch out for?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like, how does that saying go? With great power comes great responsibility. And when we're talking about influencing people, especially lots of people, that responsibility, it's huge. We got to get it right.
It could be used for good or for bad,
Yeah.
right? Like it could go either way.
Exactly. I mean, just look back in history. We've seen these charismatic leaders, right? They can inspire amazing acts of kindness, generosity, selflessness, even. But then on the flip side, we've also seen them manipulate people, exploit them, all for their own personal gain. Power can be a tricky thing.
So how do we make sure this kind of influence, this divine power, if you want to call it that, how do we make sure it's used for good?
Well, I think it starts with self-awareness. Anyone who's in a position of influence, whether it's a religious leader or a CEO, even just someone with a big social media following, they need to constantly be checking their motivations. Like, why are they doing what they're doing? Are they helping people, hurting people? What kind of impact are they having?
So it's not enough to have, like, good intentions.
Mm.
You got to actually think about the consequences of what you're doing.
Right. 100%. And being willing to listen to feedback too. Even criticism, nobody's perfect. We all have our blind spots, right? But being open to different perspectives, that can help us course correct. If we're starting to head down a path that's not so ethical, someone can say, "Hey, are you sure about that?"
Yeah, makes sense. Stay humble. Remember that you don't know everything.
Right, exactly. And I think another really important thing is to focus on service. Are you using your influence to empower people to lift them up? Or are you trying to control them, put them down? Big difference.
So it's like shifting from that me mindset to a we mindset.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself, how can I use whatever gifts I have to make a positive impact on the world? Instead of, how can I use my gifts to gain power or status? It's got to be about something bigger than you.
That makes me think about what we were talking about before, that emotional contagion thing.
Hmm.
If you're genuinely trying to help people, to serve others, people will pick up on that energy. It'll radiate outwards. It'll inspire the people around you.
That's so true. People can tell when someone's authentic, when they really care. And that kind of authenticity, it's way more persuasive than any kind of trickery or manipulation. People see right through that stuff. Be real. That's what matters.
Man, this has been a really thought-provoking conversation. We started with this deep dive into this podcast episode about, drawing people to faith.
Mm.
And we've ended up talking about, like, the big picture of influence, ethical leadership, all kinds of stuff.
And I think that's what's so great about these deep dives, right? You start with one specific source, but the conversation, it can go anywhere. It connects to all these bigger ideas, all these different contexts. It's all connected.
It's like we took this idea of, what was it, divine power, and we looked at how it shows up in, like, the spiritual world and the regular world. And we saw how it can be used for good, but also, we got to be careful with it.
So to our listener, the one who sent in this podcast episode, thank you. Thank you for sparking this conversation, this whole journey of discovery.
Yeah, this has been great. We hope this deep dive has given you, like, some new ideas to chew on as you keep exploring this whole world of faith, influence, ethical leadership, all of it. It's a lot, but it's fascinating stuff.
And remember, this journey, it never really ends. Keep asking questions, keep learning, keep trying to make the world a better place. Every little bit counts.
That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.